Hey everybody, I'm Laura Bathwanger, and I want to talk to you today about something that comes up a lot for me in my work with clients that I don't hear talked about too often. I think might be helpful for some of us to know a little bit more about. And that is complex trauma and how it can interact with wellness culture and with fitness culture, how it shows up for us and as something as simple as like going to the gym or even taking a class online. So complex trauma, or CPTSD, refers to an ongoing pervasive pattern of trauma that occurred. And so it's not just one thing that happened. It's not just a violent event or an accident, which are terrible things, of course. There's no good trauma. But complex trauma is a little bit different in that it stretches over a longer period of time, and it includes often a relational element. So often when we talk about complex trauma, we're also talking about developmental trauma, which is complex trauma that happened when we were really young, during those developmental years. So I just want to say briefly that neither of these things is about blaming anybody. It's not about blaming your parents. But if we did have developmental trauma, it could be because there was an environmental failure, like something was going wrong in the environment around us. Maybe our parents were under such tremendous stress, they weren't able to take care of us in the way that ideally they would have liked to. There may have been something going on in the culture that was outside of their control. Could have been a single parent household. It could be so many reasons, low socioeconomic status. And all of these things can add to what is, for a child, an existential threat. And so this existential threat is that their caregivers or the environment aren't able to provide them with their basic needs and to support them in their emotional development. These are things that later in life create just a cascade of different problems, as many of you know from the ACEs studies. And so the good news is that all of these things can be mitigated later. The bad news is that we have to notice them first. We have to be able to work with them. And so one of the places that this really comes up, I find, is in something like a yoga class or an exercise class. So I just want to talk a little bit more about how this comes about in the first place and then how it gets reenacted later. So basically, when we're children, if our needs are not being met the way that they need to, we are not able to hold complex thoughts about why that might be. We can't understand that there's a problem in the environment. We can't understand that the environment is bad. Instead, we tend to think, we have to think that we are the problem. We're not able to think, oh, my parents are really going through it right now. In fact, we can't even think that our parents are bad people, because we need to preserve the idea that they are able to love us. As Dr. Lawrence Haller says, we need to preserve the idea that there is still love in the world. So instead of blaming the parents, instead of understanding that something out there is a problem, we turn it inward and we blame ourselves. And so this can look like perfectionism, like if I could just get myself right. It's shaming ourselves, like I should have done a better job, or I'm always a problem. It can look like, on a physiological level, it can look like dissociation, shutdown, numbness, or it could be constantly on edge, trying to make sure we're managing the feelings of those around us. But all of these are just different strategies and responses to what is, as I said, essentially an existential threat. It is life or death, whether or not how we manage the situation. And so the strategies that we use were really effective as kids. And as we get older, the strategies become less effective, less optimal, really. And so what happens with complex trauma is we develop these three additional sort of sets of problems that we see that are different from classical shock trauma, from regular PTSD. And the first of these is that we have a difficult time regulating our emotions. What's called affect dysregulation. So it's just harder for us to control or to manage our emotions. Second, we have what's called a negative self-concept, which is exactly what you think it is. We don't think about ourselves in positive ways. We're very critical of ourselves. We shame ourselves. This could be about how we look. It could be about what we think of our intelligence. All of this with the idea that we must be the problem, because if we could just fix this, then we would be able to get the love and acceptance we need. And the third piece is that we have interpersonal disturbances. So this could be difficulty with intimate relationships. It could be difficulty with our kids. It could be having a hard time making friendships. There's a relational element that's challenging. And so all of these things come into play. as adults, all of these different strategies that we've used our whole lives to try to just manage things and just get it right when we go to something like an exercise class. And so what happens when we walk into a jazzercise class, for example, and the person up front, the instructor, is demonstrating how to do it, and we realize that we can't keep up? So in many cases, what we're going to do is decide we must be the problem. So we shame ourselves, we blame ourselves. We're like, you're so klutzy, you're so stupid, you're so bad at this. If you could just, there are so many ways that we can talk negatively to ourselves about it. Some of us will really turn this into a job then. We're gonna get it right no matter what. We go home, we practice, we buy all the tapes, and we start to really make it right. Others of us will just check out completely. We're like in a daze, we don't know what just happened, we're gone. And a certain subset of people will blame the teacher and like, that class sucked, I'm never going back. And we decide that they must be the problem. So that's a little bit of a different thing. But in all of these cases, what's missing is the idea that there could be just this mismatch between what's being asked of us and what we're currently able to do. There's no room for us to be able to respond naturally to the moment because we've got these strategies that we've evolved that get in the way. As I said, it looks different with different people. And take another example. Let's say you join a weightlifting class. It's an online weightlifting class, and the instructor is telling you the right way to do it. And so it's very easy as somebody taking this class to think that must be the only way to do it. If she's saying that's the right way to do it, that's the way I got to do it. I got to do 15 reps and it's got to be my max weight and I can't rest. I have to keep going. And what we're missing there is the idea that in a sense, this is an environmental failure for us because our bodies as they are in the moment or our systems as they are in the moment aren't able to do that. And that doesn't mean that we're bad or wrong. But because we are not able to in that moment to communicate directly with the person, or we don't feel able to ask a question because we're following our pattern of making ourselves the problem, then we will feel a certain way about it. We might get injured. We might drop the class. We could get really sick. Again, all of these things can get in the way. And what's really kind of interesting, especially as somebody who has taught a lot of these people, who has worked with a lot of these people, is that the anxiety that comes up with this relational element especially can really get in the way of being able to pay enough attention to follow along when it's a complex thing. So if it is something like a jazzercise routine or a step class, remembering complex things, this is really challenging because we're so kind of jacked up on the relational challenge and we can't even remember even a simple sequence, let alone a complex one. So a lot of times people's eyes glaze over, they check out. I can tell something like that might be happening. What do we do when we find this happening? If you are somebody who knows that you have a history of complex trauma, you may just be avoiding these situations completely. I get that. That is one way to work with it. But if you have a longing to do these classes, it might be worthwhile to find somebody who specifically offers a trauma-informed approach, or to work with a coach or a therapist on the side who can help to support you as you encounter these challenges. Another thing we can start to ask ourselves as we work through this is, where am I putting pressure on myself? So the sense of internal pressure is really important to notice because that's when our strategies come into play. And what that could look like, for example, is I got to get this right. I got to keep up with the class. I have to keep my camera on. It's not okay to turn that off. It's not okay to take a rest. So this sense of internal pressure can oftentimes be matched by an instructor's energy, and it's certainly matched by our culture at large, which reinforces the idea over and over that we're the problem, that we need to learn to work with it. So we do have a disadvantage of, especially if we're not kind of selective about the kind of people we're working with, we can accidentally reinforce the inner sense of pressure with an outer sense of pressure that tells us we should look a certain way, we should move a certain way, we should have a certain type of body. that all exercise should be done in this specific way, which just isn't realistic. We're supposed to have different bodies. And so when we notice an internal sense of pressure coming up, we can ask ourselves, we can notice it, and then we can ask ourselves if there's anything that we need to do in that moment that might be helpful, anything we can do in the moment. Could I turn off my camera? Could I take a rest? Could I step out for a moment? Even a simple intervention like that can be quite helpful. Third, if we are able to speak directly to the instructor, whether it's in the moment or afterward, unless they're absolutely terrible, most group exercise instructors or coaches are going to want to help you to find the way to do it that works for you and your body. And if they're not able to do that, or they're not interested in doing that, then they're just not the right person for you. So yeah, I feel pretty strongly about that. So that's something that you can explore, finding somebody that really works right for you. And then on the other side of it, if you are a helping person who works with people in this context, it's something that we can look for, and it's something we can help to support, both by having generally a more trauma-informed lens, by offering more variations, by normalizing differences, like some people will need to do this differently, by offering support either offline or afterward. If you're not able to do this right now, or if you have questions about this and you're not comfortable asking, ask me later. We can notice, especially if we're working one-on-one, if our client seems to have disengaged, we can pause and ask what's going on. And we can also refer them back to, if we feel like we're out of our scope of practice, we can refer them to their mental health professional. Like, I think some things are coming up here that might be outside of what I'm able to support you with, and it might be helpful to work with somebody. I hope this has been helpful. And if you have any questions, or if this resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Please feel free to like, share, and give me all of your thoughts. Thanks so much for listening. I look forward to hearing from you. In the meantime, take care.